I've never been the type to get scared easily. I work a standard 9 to 5 marketing job in Des Moines, Iowa, and my life is usually pretty routine. Work, jog in the evenings, binge a show here and there, scroll Instagram. Nothing unusual. Until last month. My friends and I planned a weekend getaway to the Appalachian region. We booked a cozy Airbnb in a small, quiet town in West Virginia. I'll admit, I didn't want to sleep in a tent. I thought a change of scenery from Iowa's endless cornfields would be nice. The place was on a narrow street lined with old houses and mature trees, a bit isolated but still walkable to a small grocery store. There were 4 of us: me, Emma, Matt, and Parker. Emma brought her younger brother, who I'll call C. Her parents are out of the picture, long story, but C is technically under her legal guardianship now. He's a normal kid, really chill, and none of us minded having him along. We arrived around 5 p.m. and unpacked. The Airbnb had 3 bedrooms, so I got a room alone, Matt and Parker shared a room, and Emma and C shared a room. Lucky me. We planned to start the evening with a small fire and roast marshmallows, but we forgot the marshmallows. Matt and I decided to drive to the nearest convenience store to grab some. C wasn't thrilled about being left alone, but we promised 10 minutes tops. On the way, Matt joked about seeing a skinwalker, which made me laugh. I reminded him we weren't in any Navajo territory. The store debate was silly, pink marshmallows or regular, but eventually we got both. I grabbed a Hershey's bar too, just in case Parker polished off all the candy. On the drive back, C told us he had seen a deer close to the house. Emma confirmed it. Apparently, the deer wasn't aggressive, so she let him get near it. Back at the Airbnb, we lit the fireplace to cook burgers and hot dogs. That's when a hiker showed up. Introduced himself as Josh, carrying a duffel bag full of various meats: chicken, beef, venison, and what he thought was pork. Emma's eyes lit up at the pork. Josh warned her he didn't know how long it had been out, but she didn't care. We ate. Emma ate the pork and quickly got sick. The rest of us were fine. We finished dinner, roasted marshmallows, Parker ate the Hershey's bar, and then we all settled in for the night. Emma didn't want to sleep in the same room as C after getting sick, so she stayed in her room and C crashed in mine. I wasn't thrilled about losing my alone time, but didn't argue. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a strange sound, something rustling outside. At first I thought it was rain or wind. I got up, cracked the window slightly, and listened. Silence. A few minutes later, something hit the window. A branch? Maybe. I couldn't see anything. I walked to the living room to check the doors. Front door locked, back door locked. Then I heard a voice. "Let me in!" It was Emma. I froze. My first thought, she's outside? But her door was locked and she was asleep with C in my room. I walked cautiously to her bedroom. She was in bed, curled up, mumbling something incomprehensible. Emma never talks in her sleep. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the desk lamp and held it like a weapon. When she turned to face me, our eyes met, and we both screamed. Parker and Matt walked in, annoyed, asking what happened. I explained I heard her voice outside. We went to the back door. Parker opened it, wet from rain, and a cold draft swept in. On the porch were human footprints. Not small, not animal, perfectly human. We locked the doors and barricaded them. Emma asked if it could be Josh. Matt said no, Josh was too normal, too nice. Then we heard a knock on the door. A familiar voice called, "Hey, open up!" It sounded like Josh. Emma snapped, "Go to hell!" It wasn't like her at all, almost territorial. The knocking stopped, then circled the house for a while, tapping against walls before finally leaving. We stayed up the rest of the night, alert and uneasy. The next morning, the tension lingered. Breakfast was awkward. Emma seemed fine now, but kept acting oddly. We decided to cut the trip short. When we went outside, our van had all 4 tires slashed. No service on our phones. The nearest town was a mile away. We couldn't push the car safely down the winding hill. We were trapped. We went back inside. Emma's behavior grew stranger. She ate excessively, seemed unusually aggressive, and even C seemed unsettled. I checked the footprints from last night. Human, yes, but something about them felt off. I didn't follow them far. We waved down Josh in a passing truck. He agreed to tow us to town. On the way, I thought I saw movement between the trees, shadows darting too fast to be human. Josh noticed too. We both stayed silent after that. Whatever it was, it followed us to the town, lingering in the edges of the forest. We got new tires, thanked Josh, and finally headed home. The shadow didn't follow us, but Emma didn't recover. She grew thinner, quieter, and hollow-eyed. She barely spoke to anyone, barely responded to texts. C confided he no longer felt safe around her. I still think about that night. I don't know what or who was outside that Airbnb. There was no monster, no supernatural force, just someone or something that shouldn't have been there playing on our fear. Even now, months later, every time I stay somewhere new, I check locks obsessively, inspect windows, and listen for whispers that might not be there. I don't know who or what was calling my name, and I don't know if I'll ever find out. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but what happened last weekend has made me question everything. My friend Adam and I decided to take a weekend trip away from the city. We found a small Airbnb in the mountains that looked peaceful, perfect for escaping the noise of daily life. When we arrived, the house appeared old but clean, with everything we might need for a couple of days. The drive up had been long and winding, and I felt a sense of relief just to step inside and leave the world behind. That first night, after a simple dinner, we sat in front of the fireplace, talking about work, life, and random stories. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that seems comforting until it isn't. Around 11:30 p.m., I thought I heard faint footsteps upstairs. At first, I tried to ignore them. Adam was asleep in the next room, and the master bedroom was on the ground floor. I'm sure it's just the house settling, I told myself. But the sound persisted, a slow, heavy rhythm, stopping and starting at irregular intervals. By midnight, I was on edge. I tried to read, hoping to distract myself, but the creaking continued. Each sound seemed louder than the last, echoing through the old wooden floors. My curiosity and anxiety got the better of me. I crept toward the staircase, peeking upward. Nothing, just shadows dancing across the walls. Then I heard something else, a soft trickle of water. I followed it to the kitchen, checking every corner. The faucet was off, the sink was empty. I couldn't explain it. I felt a cold draft brush past me, even though all the windows were closed. When I returned to the bedroom, I noticed the door was slightly ajar, even though I had closed it. I froze. Adam was still asleep, oblivious. And then I heard it, breathing, not faint, but deliberate, steady, coming from just outside the door. My heart hammered in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to run or scream. But I stayed frozen, counting each second. Then the sound stopped, just like that, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the old walls. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat on the bed, watching the door, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. By morning, my nerves were frayed. I told Adam I couldn't stay in the house another night, but he dismissed it as first-night jitters. The next day, we explored the upstairs. All the rooms were locked or empty, except for one small room in the far corner. The air inside was unnaturally cold, colder than the rest of the house. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. I had no idea why anyone would lock a single room when no one else was staying in the house. The thought unsettled me, and I didn't push it further. That night, we tried to settle in again. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the trees outside made my pulse spike. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something strange, a small piece of paper on the side table. I had definitely checked the room earlier. On it was a single handwritten message: "Leave before it's too late." My stomach sank. I showed it to Adam. He laughed nervously and shook his head, calling it a prank or a coincidence. But I knew what I saw. That paper hadn't been there before. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dim light of the fireplace, watching shadows stretch across the walls, listening to every sound. Around 3 a.m., I thought I heard a door creak upstairs. I froze, listening intently. Nothing. Then a slow thump, followed by silence. I checked all the doors, locked. Windows, closed. No one else was in the house. I tried to calm myself, but by morning, my nerves were shredded. We packed quickly and decided to leave immediately. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house through the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, I thought I saw movement in one of the upstairs windows, but when I blinked, it was gone. The rest of the drive was quiet. Neither Adam or I spoke much, both lost in our thoughts. I kept replaying every sound, every shadow, every moment of that night. I couldn't explain it, but I felt watched. Back home, I tried to rationalize everything. The creaking floors, the cold drafts, the paper, it all could be explained by an old house, wind, and nerves. But something about it gnawed at me. I kept checking my phone for messages from the Airbnb host or emails or anything. Nothing. I've since avoided thinking about that weekend, but the memory lingers. Every time I hear a creak in my own apartment, I remember that house in the mountains, the cold drafts, the footsteps that weren't there, and the paper telling me to leave. I'm not sure what I experienced. Maybe it was stress, exhaustion, or coincidence, but one thing is certain. I will never go back to that house, and I will never, ever book an Airbnb in isolation without thinking twice. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that someone or something was in that house with us, watching, waiting. And if that feeling doesn't leave me soon, I don't know how I'll ever feel safe in a quiet house again.
I usually don't believe in anything paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, whatever, you name it. But I'm not exactly sure what I experienced that weekend, and it's been gnawing at me ever since. It all started when my friends and I decided to rent an Airbnb cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina. We were looking for a quick escape from the city, just some hiking, drinks, and time away from our normal routines. The listing seemed perfect. 3 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, and a wraparound porch that promised views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. What I didn't notice in the listing was the small note in the description that said, "One room is permanently locked. Please respect it." Honestly, I didn't think much of it at the time. Probably just storage, I thought. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The cabin was tucked at the end of a narrow dirt road, surrounded by dense trees. The sun was low, the shadows stretching across the driveway. My friend, Mark, was the first to unpack, while Jenny and I checked out the inside. Everything was exactly as the photos had shown. The living room smelled faintly of wood polish and something else I couldn't identify. 3 bedrooms, mine, Mark's, and Jenny's. There was a 4th door at the end of the hallway, smaller than the others, with a sturdy padlock hanging on it. Jenny raised her eyebrow. Think we should peek? I laughed. It says don't, so obviously not. Mark shrugged. Yeah, probably just old stuff. We dropped our bags in our rooms, made a quick dinner, and spent the evening drinking and talking by the fireplace. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in outside, and the woods around the cabin seemed to swallow the light. At some point, I realized I was the only one awake. Jenny and Mark had gone to bed hours ago. The silence was almost unbearable. I wandered the cabin, thinking about going outside to smoke, when I heard a faint, metallic click from down the hallway. My heart pounded. It's probably nothing, I whispered to myself. But the click came again, followed by a soft scraping sound, like metal being dragged across wood. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the door. The padlock was still hanging there, intact. Nothing had changed. I shrugged it off and went back to the living room, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows made my skin crawl. I eventually sat on the couch, staring at the hallway, flashlight resting on my knees. Around 2 a.m., I finally heard it clearly. A voice. Help me. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it came from the locked room. My stomach dropped. I couldn't move at first, my mind racing through every rational explanation. Maybe it was Jenny or Mark playing a joke, but I knew they were asleep. I walked closer to the door. The voice whispered again, more urgent this time. Please, don't leave me here. I felt my hands shake as I pressed my ear against the door. No one else was in the cabin. My flashlight's beam caught something strange on the floor. A faint outline, like the shadow of a person crouched low, but it disappeared the second I moved the light. I ran to Jenny's room. She was out cold, breathing evenly. I woke Mark. Nothing. They were both asleep, deeply. I went back to the locked door, my curiosity getting the better of me. I tried the knob, locked tight, no way to see inside. The voice was gone, but the feeling lingered. I couldn't explain it, and I hated that I was scared. The next morning, we decided to ignore it. Breakfast, coffee, a hike. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet, and the cabin seemed somehow darker than it had the day before. That night, I stayed up again. The others fell asleep, leaving me alone with the shadows. Around 1 a.m., the voice returned, louder this time. Please, open it. I froze. This time it wasn't soft. It sounded desperate. My hand hovered over the padlock. I didn't know why, but I pulled out my phone and searched the Airbnb reviews for anything about the locked room. Most reviews just mentioned the cabin's beauty and privacy. One review caught my eye. Don't go into the locked room. Whatever you do, don't. I learned the hard way. My stomach sank. I was about to call out to Mark and Jenny when the door creaked open. Slowly, by itself. I fell back, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The door was ajar, the padlock dangling uselessly. I didn't go in. I couldn't. But I watched it, frozen, as a faint light seemed to glow from inside the room. Then the whisper came again. Finally, someone listens. I bolted to the living room. My hands shaking, I grabbed my keys, my phone, and shook Mark awake. Jenny didn't even stir. I told them we were leaving, immediately. Mark laughed nervously, assuming I'd had too much wine. But when he saw my face, he stopped laughing. We drove off in silence. The fog was thick outside, and the trees seemed to close in around us. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something following. Nothing. but I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin was watching us leave. The next day, I called the Airbnb host. No answer. Texts went unread. I tried searching the property online. The listing had been removed. I've told a few friends about what happened. Most laugh it off, calling it stress or imagination. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt.
My name's Jason. I'm 31, work in IT support, and live in Portland, Oregon. I usually keep to myself, work long hours and spend weekends catching up on shows or reading. But last month, I decided to take a short weekend trip to escape my apartment and my routine. I booked a small Airbnb in the Northwest District, near NW 23rd Avenue, a street full of small restaurants, boutiques, and coffee shops. The listing looked perfect. One bedroom, clean, quiet, and private. The host had excellent reviews, and the price was reasonable. I arrived on Friday afternoon around 3 p.m., parked on the street, and entered using the code the host sent. The building itself was old, but well-maintained. Everything inside smelled faintly of cedar and cleaning supplies. The living room had a small couch and a tiny kitchen tucked in the corner. I unpacked my bag, made a sandwich, and relaxed on the couch, scrolling through my phone. Everything seemed normal. Later that evening, I went out to explore the neighborhood. The streets were lively, but not crowded. People walking dogs, sipping coffee on sidewalks, and browsing shops. Around 10 p.m., I returned to the apartment and noticed something strange. A pair of eyes peering through the blinds of the apartment across the street. I froze. The window was half open, and the eyes were just watching. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, they were gone. I told myself it was nothing, probably a neighbor returning from work or someone walking by. I didn't think much of it at the time. The next morning, I went for coffee at a small cafe 2 blocks away. When I returned around noon, I noticed the door to my Airbnb was slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat. I was careful. I always double-checked locks. I stepped inside slowly, checking each corner. Nothing seemed disturbed. My bag was still on the bed, laptop untouched, but the door being ajar made my stomach twist. I texted the host. "Hey, I came back and the door was slightly open. Did anyone else have access today?" No reply. I waited an hour, then sent another. Just want to make sure no one entered without my knowledge. Still nothing. I decided to go out again, but kept glancing at the apartment across the street. I thought maybe I had seen someone before, but now it felt intentional. Around 5 p.m., I noticed the blinds twitch slightly. Not because of wind. Someone was moving them from the inside. I walked around the block to buy snacks, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. When I returned, around 5 p.m., the door was closed and locked. Everything inside looked normal. But then I saw it. A small folded piece of paper tucked under the door. My name written on it, in neat, precise handwriting. I picked it up carefully. It read, "I saw you check in." I froze. My mind raced. Who could have written this? My only guess was the neighbor. But why? What did they want? I called Airbnb support. They said there was no record of anyone entering. I asked about cameras in the building. The host claimed there were none. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the window, the street, and the building across from me. Every small movement made me tense. Around 2 a.m., I heard the faint sound of something scraping against the floor below the window. I stayed perfectly still, listening. It stopped after a few seconds. The next morning, I decided to leave. I packed quickly,
and checked out around 8 a.m., leaving the key in the lockbox. On my way out, I glanced at the apartment across the street. The blinds moved slightly again. I never saw anyone directly enter or leave, but I know I was being watched. Someone had seen me check in, followed my movements, and left a note. And now, even when I stay in hotels, I can't help but notice neighbors across the street, peeking through blinds. The idea that someone might be watching, noting my routine, is something that stays with you long after you've left the building.
My name is Mark. I'm 34, work in accounting, and live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I usually keep a quiet routine: office work, dinner at home, and weekend errands. Nothing exciting, nothing unusual. Last month, though, I decided to take a short weekend trip. I booked a small Airbnb in northeast Minneapolis near Central Avenue, a neighborhood full of old brick buildings, cafes, and antique shops. The listing was for a tiny studio on the second floor of an old building. It looked clean, modern, and private. The host had good reviews, seemed responsive, and the price was reasonable. I thought it would be perfect for a quiet weekend to myself. I arrived Friday afternoon around 2 p.m., parked on the street, and entered the apartment using the code the host sent. The building was quiet. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning supplies mixed with a hint of damp brick. Everything in the apartment looked fine. The air smelled faintly of pine, windows let in plenty of light, and the furniture was minimal but neat. I unpacked my bag, brewed a cup of coffee, and settled on the small couch to relax. After a couple of hours, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to explore the building. The hallway was quiet, the carpet worn but clean, and the walls covered with a few faded paintings. That's when I noticed it. A small metal key lying near the fire escape door. I bent down to pick it up. It wasn't my key. I looked around. No one was there. I turned the key in my fingers. It was old, heavy, with a small number etched on it, 47. I shrugged. Maybe a previous tenant dropped it. I tucked it into my pocket and continued my walk down the hall, checking doors I wasn't supposed to, half out of curiosity and half out of habit. Nothing seemed unusual. Later that evening, I was making dinner when I felt the key in my pocket again. It felt heavier, more solid than I remembered. I pulled it out and examined it. It had no identifying markings, nothing to tell me which lock it might fit. The apartment had only one lock, the code entry at the front door. The bedroom had no separate lock. I tried not to think about it, put the key on the kitchen counter, and returned to cooking. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every small noise, footsteps in the hallway, the pipes in the wall, a floorboard creaking, made me tense. I kept imagining someone in the building watching me, waiting for me to notice the key. The next morning, I went out for coffee at a small cafe on Central Avenue, trying to distract myself. When I returned around noon, the key was gone. Not on the counter, not on the floor, nowhere. I panicked. Who could have taken it? I was the only one in the apartment. The front door had been locked. I called Airbnb support, but they said they couldn't track physical items in the apartment. I tried calling the host, no answer. The feeling of being watched settled heavily in my chest. I went to the window and looked down at the street. Nothing. Cars, a few pedestrians, nothing suspicious. But I knew someone had been in the building. I could feel it. That evening, I set up my laptop to record the living room while I went out to pick up some groceries. When I returned, the footage was corrupted. A few seconds showed a shadow moving across the kitchen, then nothing. I watched it repeatedly, convinced I imagined it. Over the next day, more unsettling things happened. A drawer I was sure I had closed was slightly open. Couch cushions had shifted, and then the key reappeared. This time on the opposite side of the room, exactly where I had never placed it.
I called the host again. Someone is moving things in the apartment. I found a key that wasn't mine, and now it keeps appearing. Can you explain? The reply came late at night. All keys in the building are accounted for. You must be mistaken. Enjoy your stay. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the key on the floor. Every time I looked away, I felt it might move. I checked my phone, emails, messages. Nothing. The apartment was silent. The next morning, I packed quickly and left. I didn't even bother with proper checkout, just locked the door behind me. I left the key on the counter, hoping it would stay there for someone else to find. Months later, I still think about it. Sometimes I dream about finding a key under my own bed, in my own apartment. The number 47 etched in metal. I can't explain it. No one else ever admitted to being in the apartment. I don't know if it was the host, someone with access, or just my mind playing tricks. But I know one thing. Ordinary places, quiet buildings, and seemingly trustworthy hosts can hide something unexplainable. A key that shouldn't exist can make you feel watched, vulnerable, and profoundly unsettled long after you leave. Even now, when I stay in hotels or other Airbnbs, I triple-check my keys, my locks, and my surroundings. Every small sound, every misplaced object makes me stop and wonder, was it truly there before? Or did someone place it while I wasn't looking?
I booked a small Airbnb in suburban Denver for a long weekend. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom apartment a few blocks from downtown, clean, well-reviewed, cheap. I thought it would be nice to get away from my routine. 8-hour days at the insurance office, endless emails, and the same 2 routes back home every night. The first day was uneventful. I arrived late afternoon, pulled up to a quiet street, unlocked the door with the code the host had sent, and walked in. The apartment was exactly as advertised. Small living room, kitchen that looked like it hadn't been used much, a bed that wasn't uncomfortable. I dropped my bag, ordered takeout from Uber Eats, and watched TV for a couple of hours. Nothing seemed out of place. But the first thing that caught my attention happened that night. I set my phone on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. I was scrolling Instagram in bed when I noticed something strange. The small bookshelf next to the bed, which had been empty when I arrived, now had a single paperback on it. I didn't remember bringing a book. I checked my bag, nothing. I laughed it off. Maybe it was left behind by the previous guest. I shrugged and set it aside, figuring I'd ask the host in the morning. The next day, I left the apartment around 9 to walk downtown. When I returned in the evening, something else had changed. The book had moved from the small shelf to the corner of the desk. I was sure I hadn't touched it. I even checked my phone. No notifications, no reminders, nothing. I told myself I was tired, imagining things. But that night, I noticed something else. My chair, which I had left pushed under the desk, was now slightly angled away from it, as if someone had been sitting there. I live alone. I hadn't been in the room since I left for dinner. I even double-checked the lock on the door when I went out. I tried rationalizing it. Airbnb reviews are mostly positive. The host had over 300 5-star ratings. Maybe the cleaning crew came early and moved a few things by accident. That seemed plausible. I told myself to let it go. The third day, things escalated. I returned from a morning walk, and the apartment smelled faintly of something metallic. Not blood, not exactly, just off. My laptop was sitting on the kitchen counter in landscape orientation, completely open. I don't leave it open when I go out. My charger, which I had neatly coiled on the desk, was now plugged into the wall with the cable stretched across the floor.
I messaged the host through the Airbnb app, trying to keep it casual. "Hey, just wondering if anyone comes in while I'm out?" No response. I waited a couple of hours. Nothing. That night I didn't sleep well. Every little sound made me jump. I kept my phone next to me, checked the locks repeatedly, and stared at the bookshelf. The book was back on it, now upright, with the title facing outward. I hadn't moved it. By the fourth day, I was actively panicking. I set up my laptop to live stream the apartment while I went out. It was just my phone on a tripod, facing the bed and the bookshelf. I left for a coffee shop, tried to work for a few hours, but my mind kept drifting back to the apartment. When I came back, I immediately checked the live stream. Nothing. I watched the recording. Nothing moved while I was gone. I exhaled, feeling ridiculous. But then I stepped inside and my phone lit up. A new message notification on the Airbnb app. The host. "Hope you're enjoying the book." I froze. I didn't reply. I just stared at the bookshelf. The book was still there, the same paperback I didn't bring. I texted back. "I didn't touch it. What do you mean?" No response for an hour. Then, "Sometimes guests leave things behind. Sometimes I like to rearrange a little. Nothing serious." The casual tone made my stomach knot. Rearrange? Why? And how would they even get in without me noticing? I started checking everything obsessively. Locks, windows, the security of the apartment door. Nothing had been broken, no signs of forced entry. But the subtle changes kept happening. By the fifth night, I was losing my sense of safety. I put my luggage by the door, ready to leave in the morning. I went to bed early, exhausted, telling myself to sleep through it. Around 3 a.m., I woke up. The room was darker than I expected. My lamp was on, though I'd turned it off. My phone was on the floor, screen glowing with the home screen. I hadn't touched it. The book? It was gone. I got up, heart racing, and noticed the closet door slightly ajar. I don't leave it open. Inside, on the top shelf, was the book, open to a random page. I left immediately. I didn't care about my things. I grabbed my bag, locked the door, and booked a hotel downtown. I didn't sleep in that apartment again. I contacted Airbnb to report it. They were polite but vague. "We've reviewed the host's history. No policy violations were found. If you feel unsafe, please choose a different property in the future." I never got an explanation. I stayed away for months. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just a strange, isolated experience. But even now, I check my locks obsessively. I still have nightmares about someone watching, rearranging things while I'm asleep or out of the room. The worst part? I don't know if it was the host, someone with access, or if I really did imagine part of it. I don't use Airbnb anymore. And every time I see a small bookshelf next to a bed or a paperback lying around where it shouldn't be, my hands get sweaty and I check the door. I keep wondering, if it could happen once, could it happen again? And this time, would I even notice?